Hello, I'm Steve with Apogee Hardwood Cleaning, doing another one of my blog series, and I'm going to be going over the history of hardwood flooring today. Alright, hardwood flooring starts with basically the beginning of time with people. In the early days, when people first started building houses and places to live, they basically used whatever material was available to them in where they were living. So a lot of places would use dirt floors, stone floors, straw floors, but they were in places where wood was readily available. They would do wood floors as well. So wood floors has been around since the beginning of building shelters. So now what we think about hardwood floors really began in the 17th century. Even though I did find information showing that there were hardwood floors all the way back to the Egyptian times with the pyramids and those places. A lot of those had some hardwood floors in different places. So hardwood floors has been around for centuries. But 17th century is really when the modern idea of a hardwood floor really started. That's when the craftsmanship, the designs, trying to put patterns into your floors, coloring them with either stain or paint, putting finish on them to make them shiny. Those types of things really started in the 17th century. A lot of it started in France with the parquet floors, where they would cut the boards down to small pieces and making them into different designs in the floors. Again, those types of floors in that time frame would have been more to the rich people because they would have had the money to be able to do those types of things, where your average people would still have been using hardwood floors that were just the bare wood, no finish, no sanding, none of that stuff. So that's the early days of hardwood floors. In the United States, when the settlers first came to the Americas, they came to the east coast of this country, and the east coast of this country is mostly wooded. So as I was saying, the early settlements, the early people when they're building houses were using what was locally available, and since the east coast of the United States is heavily wooded, there were a lot of wood floors in that time frame. So a lot of people did have wood floors. They were just the bare wood without the finish. That came in later off of the upper echelons of the people would be sanding and finishing their wood floors. The popularity of wood floors really coincided with the Industrial Revolution, the late 1800s into the 1900s. So when factories started mass producing floors is really when your average people were starting to get floors. So that's when they were also able to start doing the tongue and groove on the floors, which is the interlocking floors that we see that's common nowadays. Back then, when you had someone installing the floor, they would just put boards down and probably nail them down or glue them down, whatever they had available. Because it was much easier. It would have been a lot of work for an individual carpenter to cut the tongue and groove into the boards. So it would have been much more cost effective just to put the boards down. Now with the Industrial Revolution going into the 1900s is when the major developments in hardwood floors started. So early on, what they would have used to finish the floors was what's called a paste wax. So they would have waxed the floors to get that nice shiny look and to protect the floor from water and other contaminants that can damage the wood, allowing the wood to last longer. It was in the 1940s and 50s. It was in the 1940s when the factories started doing the pre-finished floors. So when they started putting finish on the boards, staining the boards, and then finishing the boards prior to installing them in the homes. That started in the 40s and 50s. Also during that time frame is when polyurethane was invented and started being used. Polyurethane is a lot easier to use than the waxes, because once you put a polyurethane onto the floor, it will last years with just minimal maintenance on it. Whereas the polyurethane, the hard paste wax has to be reapplied multiple times during that time frame, multiple times each year to keep the floor looking good. So it's much higher maintenance to wax a floor than it is to use a polyurethane. And then, so that's when the hardwood floors really started getting popular in the 1940s and 50s. Carpet was also coming out at that time, so carpet was a major factor in floors during that time. So, but that's when a lot of the developments for hardwood floors came out. Then in the 1980s, 1979 is when they invented the water-based polyurethanes. And that was a huge development for hardwood floors as well, because when you are using the oil-based polyurethane, which is the original polyurethane that they came out with, it has a strong smell to it, plus it's very slow in drying. So they have ways of drying it fast in the factories using ultraviolet rays to harden those polyurethanes quickly. But whenever it's installed in a home, it takes hours or even days for the oil-based polyurethanes to dry. And it also stinks up the house during that time frame, so you can't really be in the house when an oil-based polyurethane is being applied. So in the 1980s, that changed. So now all we used is water-based polyurethanes, and it's a great advantage to the homes. So that is how we've gotten to where we are with hardwood floors. The blog actually has a number of other things in this that it talks about, including engineered floors and vinyl floors and all the other choices that have developed over the years as well. My plan is to create another article, blog article, for the history of flooring and the history of the polyurethanes and these things that we use nowadays, and go in more depth than what was in this article. But hopefully I'll get that out here sometime in the coming months and get something more detailed for you. Hopefully that you found that interesting and helpful. Have a great day.